Expedition 33 is a game that just came out of kind of nowhere. From a developer and studio that had never been known before, to a composer off of SoundCloud and writers off of Reddit. I don't think anybody expected this game to even exist, let alone be as interesting and as insane of a game as it ended up being. And with that deviation in development comes a deviation in story. Expedition 33 is one of the most interesting stories I've seen in an RPG, and even just in a game in a while. And I want to go over that today. So, obvious spoilers ahead for the game. If you haven't played it yet, trust me, leave right now. Alright, so this will be a mostly unscripted, rambled madness of the endings of the game and what I think the themes are. But before we even start off with that, I think we need to talk about the villains of the game, because often a story's villains are the ones that encompasses their themes the most. The main villain of Expedition 33 is introduced in the opening moments of the game, and she already paints an interesting picture. And those of you that have finished the game might still say, well, the themes are obvious, it's about grief. And yeah, grief is the largest theme in the game. I mean, the game even straight up tells us that. But I think there's more to it than simply just that. First, starting with the Paintress, obviously, she's a creature with the ability to create and destroy life. However, she's mainly seen using this power to create life. And as an antagonist, this is already an odd power set to have. Ignoring the fact that she lowers the maximum age of life every year, turning everyone above that age into some nice, floral Thanos dust, even though it's not actually her, we'll get to that later. But the gift of creation is something often touted as a heroic trait. Now, to streamline the discussion, let's just rip off the plot band-aid here. And those of you that are still watching that haven't played the game, go, shoot, get off my lawn, go, get! Alright, well now that they're gone, ripping off the plot band-aid, the real identity of the Paintress is Aileen, who's the mother of Alicia/Mael, who I'm just gonna call Mael for the rest of this, since that's who we know her as for the rest of the game, and Verso. The world we live in, that she creates and paints in, is the last painting of her son Verso, who died in a fire. And she's using this world and her control over it to live with the last remaining memories of her son, and his creations, his childhood friends, like the monkey. I like the monkey.
Kill me and then.
Meanwhile, her husband Renoir is the one we find out is killing everyone, all of which are the painted creations of either Aileen or Verso. Except for Mael, who's the influx point of the story. Being the daughter of Aileen and Renoir, she's the one we get to experience these themes of grief through. But as I played through the game, there's one question that I'd kept nagging at me, and that is why the game chose to use painting as its main metaphor. I mean, surely other mediums would have worked too. Some might have even made more sense. Why not coders creating a game to harness the soul of a lost son? Actually, that would have just made it like every other horror ARG, bowing at the feet of game theory for a mere morsel of a shout-out. But even in lore, we know of factions called the Writers, who supposedly have a similar mastery over writing. Well, I think this is an intentional decision showcasing one of the ways that grief can be handled. Escapism. I mean, think about it. Aileen creates a world where her son is alive, one where her husband endlessly protects her, and where everyone can be happy together for the rest of their lives. And what do we find out happens to those who stay in the paintings too long? They lose themselves, becoming lost in the painting. Lost in sheer delusion. And this should sound familiar, obvious, even. So many people bury their grief in endless escapism, especially artists and creatives, which I expect many watching this video to be. I know at least one of you has an OC which bears the weight of your own traumas, like the Bidoof bearing the weight of every HM in the game of my diamond run. We have the ability to create our ideal reality, and the temptation to lose yourself in it is magnetizing. I mean, why wouldn't you? The worlds we create are endlessly happier than the one we live in, and that's exactly what Aileen decides to do. She'd rather live in a fake world happy than in the real world tortured. But she's not the only character. Here comes her husband Renoir, who arguably is the true main villain of the game. How does he decide to handle the grief of losing his son? Say it with me, toxic masculinity! And by that I mean Renoir opts instead to destroy the canvas. He decides the best way to move on from his trauma is to quite literally bury and destroy it, both for himself and to save his wife from losing herself in the canvas. This obviously rubs shoulders with Aileen, being quite literally forced to face the reality she no longer wants to live. Now this brings us to our third character, Mael, who as I mentioned is the influx point where we get to decide between these two ways of handling trauma and grief. We get to choose between escapism or reality. And that finally brings me to the ending of the game that I've been wanting to talk about for so long. At the end of the game, we get a choice to make. We can either live inside the canvas with our fake brother, despite Verso's insistence to letting him die and rest, however living with all the friends that we've come to know and love throughout the game, but lose ourselves in the process. Or we can return to the real world, unsure if the life we return to will be one that we even think is worth living. And looking at the community reaction, it seems many people chose the option I did, to let Verso destroy the canvas and return Mael to home. This seems like the correct option, finally leaving the allure of escapism and to begin, hopefully, healing and rebuilding a life worth living. And I understand why many chose this option. I mean, hell, I did. It's a hopeful ending, one that knows despite the hardships our characters have, they can move past it. However, allow me to play devil's advocate for just one moment. Why choosing to stay in the canvas could be seen as better, and it once again plays into the themes of escapism, one that I think are much more relevant to our world today than at first glance. I think the game using painting as its metaphor, as mentioned, is no coincidence. I think we live in an era where so many people are able to create their own worlds via it being games, of course, or art, or music, or any other medium, and so many people are infusing that art with pieces of themselves. And that can be a great way to handle trauma, or to deal with hardships in your life. I mean, many artists take hardships of their own life and infuse their characters with them. However, what I think Expedition 33 truly tries to warn about is becoming lost in the escapism of your own creation. Going from simply putting pieces of yourself into your work, to your entire being into it. And this is something that I think a lot of people can unfortunately relate to. But further than just being themes of escapism, I think Expedition 33 is a commentary on how, nowadays, people rely far too heavily on that escapist belief and being able to create their own ways of escape, rather than facing the reality of the situation. And Expedition 33 isn't naive either. It knows full well that deciding to leave the fantasy and go back to the real world is not fun, it's not pleasant. I mean, Verso's ending isn't necessarily a happy ending either. Sure, we see Aileen and Mael go back to the real world and visit Verso one last time at his grave, but that's it. We don't see anything of these characters improving or moving on or healing, nor do we necessarily see a path for them to. And that's why I think both endings in Expedition 33 end in a very bittersweet note. There isn't a good or a bad ending. Both end up more of a litmus test of your own values. Do you value facing hardship head-on, despite the fact that you may not ever truly be able to get through it? Or do you value living a happier life even if there is some delusion involved? And while a lot of us say that we would agree with Verso when playing the game, I think a lot more of us, when presented a similar situation, would make the same choice that Mael and Aileen make. So while Expedition 33 focuses on grief and how to handle it, I think a lot of the discussion is missing this more escapist aspect and commentary, whether or not it was intentional. I think painting being a metaphor substitutable for any sort of creative endeavor really highlights the way that Expedition 33 thinks people have been handling grief in this modern time, through absorbing themselves in their own work or through the work of others to avoid facing a harsh reality, rather creating surrogates to do it for them. But I think that the team of Expedition 33 really tried to showcase the way that a lot of people do this, which is through art. And I believe that it's this take on the metaphor of grief that makes Expedition 33 hit as hard as it does in its story. I don't have any other way to end this video, so why don't you guys comment the best girl in Expedition 33 below? And why don't you shame anybody that doesn't say it's Minoko?